had a wild night with his boss, and then came home to find my ruthless husband waiting.
I never knew that one mistake would lead to me divorcing my husband and making my husband hate me forever. I thought that the friendship I had with my husband's boss was never going to be the problem, but it later cost me a great loss because I lost my husband and also my best friend. My fellow Redditors, my name is Mary and I am 30 years old. I am also an event planner, and event planning has been my passion for so many years. The name of my husband is Gabriel, and he is 35 years old and he is an architect. Gabriel and I got married about 3 months ago, and it has been great. Gabriel and I met through a mutual friend, and it was love at first sight. Gabriel was very charming at first, and I really thought he was just doing so in order to get me, but I was very wrong. Anne is one of my best friends. I met her in college, and ever since we have been together through everything. It was Anne's birthday party in summer last year, and like every other year since college, she decided to throw her usual birthday parties. I knew she could always go all out for those parties, and I always supported her. It was like every other day I was having lunch with Anne when she brought up her party that was coming up. As usual, we discussed the details, and I looked forward to the party like always. On the day of Anne's birthday, I got ready to attend, and I dressed to impress like always. I got to the venue, and I wished my best friend a happy birthday. She asked if I should go with her to say hello to the guests, and I accepted. It was such a lovely evening. Few hours into the party, I was already feeling exhausted, and I went to meet Anne, who was across the room when I ran into someone. I quickly apologized and left. I met Anne, and I told her I was leaving, but she insisted I should still stay a little. We were speaking when a man joined us. Anne proceeded to exchange pleasantries, and I was left standing. Anne later introduced us, and I discovered it was the same guy I ran into earlier. I apologized again, and Anne told me all about him, saying he was the guy she had been telling me about, but I knew she was just trying to set us up because I didn't know anyone like that. Anne left me standing with Gabriel, a guy I didn't know at that point, and I was very mad at her, but I knew she meant well because I hadn't been in a relationship in a while. Gabriel and I got speaking, and he told me a lot, but himself, and I asked him why I never met him, even when he was very close to my best friend, and he said that he normally sees me afar, but he didn't know if I was spoken for. I told him he could have just come up to me, but he never did until then. I told Gabriel I needed to leave because I had an event the next day. We didn't get to exchange numbers. I said my goodbyes to Anne, promising to meet up for lunch in a couple of days. The next day, I was booked for business because I had an event I was taking care of. I kept thinking about Gabriel because I had a very good evening with him. I knew some of the people at Anne's event, but his company was the best, and I later found out at that moment that I didn't get his number. I felt sad because I had thought maybe he didn't feel the same way. That's why he didn't ask for my number. I decided to just let it go and not worry over a guy who might not have any interest in me. The next day I met up with Anne and we talked about fashion like we always do, but she brought up Gabriel and I told her we were just talking at her event, that there was nothing more to it. And I also told her that it wasn't that serious because if it were serious, he could have asked for my number, but he didn't. Anne was surprised, and she went on to talk about how I shouldn't just wait for the guy to ask what I should have just given him. Anne, between the two of us, is the most forward. She could always get any guy she wanted. She always went for whatever she wanted. Anne somehow got my phone and dialed Gabriel's number before I could say anything to her. Gabriel picked the phone and I had no choice but to talk to him. I told him I was the one, and he was kind of surprised it was me because he wasn't expecting me to call, and I told him we never got around to exchanging numbers. We spoke for a few minutes and he had me out for lunch and I accepted. I ended the call and I didn't know what to do with Anne. I felt embarrassed. I called him because I didn't want to look desperate. But like always, we laughed over it, and I told her I had lunch with him the next day. That evening, I went to see my father. It had been a while since I knew we were repairing our relationship, because for a long time, I never knew who my father was, and at some point, I was able to find him, and I didn't know how to feel because I felt like he abandoned me. But instead, I discovered that he never knew I existed. He asked for a chance to be in my life, and I gave it to him. I didn't want to punish him for what he didn't know anything about. I had dinner with my dad, and he kept trying to be everything and more for me, and I appreciated it. I went home tired from a long day, and I slept off. The next day I went to work, and I met a couple who were planning to get married, and I was in awe. They were so in love, and I felt jealous because I wanted to have someone I could share my life with in that manner, but I didn't want to think too much into it because I usually overthink things and stress myself out. I finished with the couple and it was already lunchtime. Not long after that, Gabriel came to pick me up. He took me to my favorite restaurant. I didn't know how he knew, but I was sure it was the work of Anne. She had her name written all over it. Gabriel charmed me as usual, and we had a good time. He told me about how he had lost his family and how he had never been the same. I was feeling very sad for him because I knew what it felt like to not have any family. We finished our lunch, and Gabriel dropped me off, promising to see me later in the week. It had been a month since I last heard or spoke with Gabriel. I didn't understand why he could ghost me in such a way. I thought we were doing great. I tried to reach him a couple of times in that month, and he didn't respond. I concluded that maybe he wasn't into me as I was. I also thought maybe I was too forward. Few days later, Gabriel showed up at my store and told me he had been busy with work and he was sorry. I understood because I knew how work can be. We went out a few times, and in those times we became very close. We went out on a couple of dates, and he finally asked me out and I accepted. I was finally his girlfriend. I thought he took his time though because I was expecting it for a long time. Gabriel and I dated for some months and our relationship grew into something beautiful. I met some of his friends and it was really lovely. Anne kept going on and on about how she was the one who brought us together. But I never gave her the satisfaction because I had always said she never really introduced prior to that day, and we had been attending her parties for years. I kept teasing her about it and she loved it. Gabriel proposed to me a few months later and I panicked at some point. I didn't know what to say and Gabriel gave me some time to think about it. I appreciated it because he was not trying to rush me and I was happy. I talked to Anne and she explained to me how Gabriel loved me and he could do anything for me. She reassured me and that was everything I needed. I said yes to Gabriel the very next day and he was ecstatic. We planned our wedding and it was beautiful. I never felt so much happiness. My dad had worked me down the aisle and I had never seen him so proud. After the wedding, Gabriel had asked me to move in with him, but I didn't know what to say. I had told him that we should look for a place together and make payment together, but I changed my mind because I was very busy with work after the wedding, because I had taken some weeks off. But seeing that house hunting could be another problem added to my work schedule, I decided that we move in together. We started living together and things were going smoothly. We could wake up together, eat breakfast before going to work. We had our regular dinners with friends and family, and I always felt safe around Gabriel. He was almost everything I wanted and more. He would listen to me and solve any issue I had. I was in the store finishing up a meeting with my client when Gabriel came in. He had told me his boss was having his birthday celebration the next day. I was surprised he was just telling me, but he said that it was just planned and it was a surprise party for him. I told him I didn't know his boss because he was not at the wedding and he said he was out of town for work then. I decided to go with him because I didn't want Gabriel by himself. I thought to ask Anne to get me something to wear, and like always, she delivered and I loved it. The next day, I got ready with Gabriel and we went to the party. We got to the venue and it was packed. Gabriel introduced me to some people and we talked for a bit. Things were going smoothly and I excused myself to go to the restroom. I finished up and headed back to my surprise. The birthday boy had already walked in. I couldn't see him because a lot of people had gathered around him. I went out to call Gabriel saying I had to leave because it was getting late, but he insisted I see his boss before leaving. I accepted, and not long after he came to find me. We went together to meet his boss and say happy birthday to him, but he was busy with some important people and Gabriel asked me to wait a few minutes. We waited for an hour before we were allowed inside. At the moment, I was very pissed because I had to ask myself why he kept us waiting for that long. It wasn't fair no matter who he was. Few minutes later, we were asked to go in and see him. I was already pissed, but I made up my mind to just forget about it because of Gabriel. On getting inside, I received the shock of my life. I saw Ross, my ex-boyfriend, who left and didn't say goodbye. I couldn't believe that he was my husband's boss. I told myself I wasn't going to behave like I knew him because it had been so long, and I am already married, so Gabriel introduced us, and I could see the shock on his face too. He decided to play along with us, not knowing each other, which was fine with me, because I wasn't going to put Gabriel in the position where he had to feel his wife and his boss had history. We said happy birthday to him, and we left the office, and I kept wondering about how Ross was my husband's boss, and how weird it was to see him again. The next day, my husband noticed my mood and he asked me about it, but I told him it was nothing. I wasn't going to tell him I had a kind of relationship with his boss. I went to work like usual, and I decided to take my mind off things and bury myself in some work. After a while, Anne came around and we talked about Ross. She was surprised about the dynamics, but I had to tell her not to mention anything to Gabriel, because at that point, I wasn't going to pursue anything with him. But my friend Anne warned me to stay away from Ross because I was married, and he was the one who had left me alone when we were still together. I took her advice because I wasn't about to destroy the marriage I had with Gabriel. A few weeks later, I was at home preparing dinner when Gabriel got back from work. We ate, and he had brought up this story of how we needed to attend their yearly gala organized by his company. I did want to go, but when he had told me I was going to be considered with organizing it, I was very happy because that could be a huge plus to my store. I was happy until he told me he had suggested it to his boss, and I had to go see him the next day to make some preparation, and of course ask him a few questions. I didn't want to lose the opportunity because of my old history with Ross. I made up my mind to go, and I thanked Gabriel wholeheartedly because it was a huge opportunity and he made it happen. I got ready the next day because I had an appointment with Gabriel's boss, so I had to ride to the office with my husband. We got there and he kept me waiting like usual, but I remembered I was only there for my store and I knew this event could put us on the map. I entered his office and we greeted each other and I got down to business, but he said he needed to attend a meeting and that we should start the meeting by lunchtime. I was very angry because I knew he was messing with me. I decided to tell my husband the latest development about how his boss wanted to have a private lunch with me to talk business. He didn't see anything wrong with that, and he had said I should be patient. I went back to the office and I got started with work because I knew after that lunch, I was going to be so angry. It was time for lunch and I wasn't feeling it because I was discouraged, and I knew it was just going to open old wounds. I got down to the restaurant where we were having lunch, and I saw that Ross was early for the first time since I met him. I sat down and we got to business. He had told me how he wanted the event to be, and I took every detail down. Ross kept talking about us and I was feeling exhausted about it, and I made it clear to him he was the one who had left me. He told me he had a good reason, but honestly, I didn't want to hear it. But Ross was persistent and he asked me to please hear him out, and I did. He had told me he was left with no other choice because he had to pick between me and his family. I know Ross loved his family a lot, but I didn't know why he had to pick. He refused to tell me, promising to say it on our next lunch together. But I had explained to him that I wasn't going to keep having lunch with him because I was married. But he told me it was a harmless lunch that my husband was aware of. A few days later, we started preparing for the event. It was a big event, and I needed more hands to help out. I employed more people, and it was moving smoothly. But I still had lunch with Ross, which I kept postponing, but I knew I had to get around to going because we were going over the last details of our arrangement. I went to lunch with Ross, and we finished everything. He apologized about what happened a few years back, and I was happy because at least it was past us now. We can concentrate on the event. The day of the event came and everything was set. I went to the event with Gabriel and he was proud of what I had done with the place. Throughout the night, Ross kept staring at me and I kind of found it weird, and when he came over to talk to Gabriel, his hand kept brushing mine. At some point, I felt like he was flirting with me, which was not appropriate. A few weeks later, Ross showed up at my store telling me he wanted to take me out to thank me for the event I organized, and I respectfully declined, but he insisted. I went out with him, and it was fun for us to have reconnected after a very long time. It was fun while it lasted. Ross kept sending me flowers after that day, and it was very nice. We talked on the phone for a few minutes in the day, and most days he had said he wished he had come earlier before I got married. He still loved me, and he wanted to make up for lost time. I decided to give him a chance in order for him to try. We went out for a few dinners, but I didn't see it as something that could harm my husband. But I knew I was lying to him, and I decided to stop. I discussed it with Ross about us telling Gabriel about us knowing each other, but he had said no, that it could complete things at work, and he didn't want to lose his best employee over what we had. I told him since we hadn't done anything bad, we should come out to Gabriel, but he refused. From that moment, my secret relationship with Ross grew. We kept seeing each other, and I became too comfortable. I felt like at some point my husband had suspicions about my late-night dinners, but he had thought it was just work. It was like every other day when I met up with Ross, and he had told me I should be creating enough time for us. I had to tell him I was married, and it could be very bad for either of us should my husband find out that we had been seeing each other secretly. But Ross kept asking for more time with him, which I gave in. Looking back now, I regret my decision because it had created problems for me. My husband and I started having issues, all because I wasn't at home anymore. And most days I wasn't at the store either. But I had to lie to him that I was busy with different clients and they were taking my time. He believed me for some couple of weeks before Ross had gone out of town for a business trip. I wasn't happy because I found myself to be missing him. I made plans for Gabriel, and I should go out for dinner since we had been having issues for some weeks now. We reconnected and everything was okay before Ross returned. I went back to see him, and at some point we ran into Anne at a restaurant. I didn't know what to say because she had warned me to stay away from Ross, but I didn't listen to her. She pulled me aside and he told me I was making a big mistake going out with my husband's boss, but I didn't listen to her. I told her it was nothing. I went back to meet up with Ross, and I didn't know that Anne had already gone behind my back to call my husband to the restaurant. I didn't know Gabriel came in secretly and saw me and his boss together. Ross took me to his house, and we spent the night together. The next morning, I saw Ross sleeping naked beside me. I felt like I had committed a big sin because everything that Anne had said to me was true. I was going after someone who did not care about me, someone who had abandoned me. I quickly got ready and I went back home to my husband, planning to apologize to him and tell him everything that had happened. But I got home to see that Gabriel was very angry at me, and he already had the divorce papers signed. He didn't allow me to explain anything. He was very curious with me. I begged him to listen to me, but he said he could have considered forgiving me if I didn't sleep with his boss. I felt horrible because he kept guilt-tripping me, and I felt worse. Gabriel asked me to pack out of the house, and I did. I shouldn't have been deceived by Ross, who left me when I needed him, and when he discovered I was married, he came and ruined my marriage. Updates. Hello, guys. So I signed the divorce papers, and Gabriel and I are officially divorced. It was very exhausting. I was not happy because it took a great toll on me. I lost my husband due to my foolishness. I was happy in that marriage, and I knew that my husband loved me, but I went after someone who I wasn't sure of. I heard that Gabriel had resigned from work and he has started his own business. I was happy for him. And through everything that was happening, Anne had come clean to me that she was the one who sold me out to my husband. At first, I was very furious as to why she did that, but she said I was going to a place I wasn't going to come back from. I understand she was only doing that for me to see I was throwing away my marriage for someone who wasn't worth it. But looking back now, I wished it never destroyed my marriage. Ever since that night and everything that happened after, Ross hasn't called me. I tried calling him a few times, but he ghosted me. That had made what I did even worse because I lost both sides. My relationship with Anne hasn't been the same ever since. I lost all contact with Gabriel. I am now staying with my father, and he has been very supportive. I couldn't have gone through this without his support. Sometimes in life, decisions are harder than they appear to be. Not everything ends up being a left or right decision. Not even a true or false decision is easy sometimes. I know this now because I'm being faced with making such decisions that appear snappy, but really, they're not. My name is Olivia, and I'm a 28-year-old salonist. I own my own salon, and it's a passion I've been pursuing almost all my life. I'm married, and my husband's name is Stanley. He's 28 years old, and he's a freelancer. He's actually a very successful freelancer, and he's done freelancing for almost 10 years now. He's so good at it that it became his own personal profession, and no, he doesn't work from home. He has his own office with people under him who work for him. So guys, we got married 2 years ago, and we dated for exactly 8 months. I don't think we rushed into the marriage, though. My parents always felt like we were moving too fast. I've seen people get married within 5 or even 3 months. The fact that we waited 8 months didn't seem like a rush to me. We met each other and felt like there was no need to keep waiting. We believed that we were right for each other, so we got married. Our married life is nothing out of the ordinary. It's just like a normal marriage, and there is no drama. We fight once in a while and disagree over some certain things, but that's all there is to it. We close from work at the same time, but... Now there's something that has been bothering me for some time. Just a few days ago, I had to temporarily close down my salon because I felt like I was being overcharged for tax. It was also becoming difficult to run the salon because I couldn't keep up with the bills that kept piling up. I had people who worked for me, and I had to pay them too. I was making a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it always felt like I wasn't making any profit. I decided to close down the salon so I could take time to figure out exactly what I was doing wrong. I didn't think closing down the salon would be as difficult as it currently is, but I guess one can never be too sure. It's a lot going on, and I never expected any of it to affect my marriage. Staying at home is difficult, but what's worse is being broke while you're at it. Stanley and I recently got into a fight because I didn't like the kind of reply he gave when I told him I was closing down my business. I didn't expect my husband to act so nonchalantly. If your wife comes to you with a business problem and complains about not making profit and getting overtaxed, you're at least supposed to help her out. If he even offered to help me, I'd have been very grateful. But instead, he just decided to go on with his life as if nothing happened. I expected Stanley to offer me money as a form of help. He has the money and I know it. He's a freelancer that earns on a daily basis. How hard could it be for him to offer me some money to help my business? Before anyone judges Key in the comments section, let me put it out there that I know Stanley earns a lot of money. He doesn't take up small tasks. He once told me that he doesn't take up any task less than $100. He also has people under him who work for him while he teaches them in return. I don't think that he would go broke if he just helped me out. At first, I tried waiting to see if he would eventually try to offer help, but he didn't, so I confronted him. I asked him why he wasn't offering me any help, and he gave me the silly excuse of saying that he just wanted me to figure things out on my own and become a strong businesswoman. What kind of silly excuse is that? I mean, how could anyone really say that to his wife? I've had that salon for 6 good years. If I was able to run it for 6 years and move to a bigger place, then that proves I'm a strong businesswoman. I don't know why he feels like there needs to be a test to prove that. I made it clear to him that what I needed was his financial assistance, not his advice, but he refused to listen to me. Instead, he just decided to feel irritated and angry. That really made me upset because I've been a very independent person, even after I got married to him. I don't ask him to give me money, ever. He only gets things for me out of his own free will and when he feels like it. I don't ask him for money or monthly allowance, so it really hurts me that he's taking his time and making up excuses now that I finally need his help, and I've asked him for money. I'm upset, and I don't think I'll ever not be, because when I think about everything that's been happening within these few days, I get really angry. As if all that is not enough, he shuts me up when I try to bring up the topic again. He told me he's done with that conversation and would not be entertaining it anymore. Stanley has been getting on my nerves a lot, and it's very annoying. I decided to speak to one of my friends just 2 days ago, and she advised me to play it cool and just re-strategize. I mean, how am I supposed to restructure when I don't have any financial support? How am I supposed to get back on my feet with no help? My only source of income is temporarily closed, and my husband is trying to play smart with me. While I was sitting at home doing nothing yesterday, I decided to scroll around social media since that was all I started doing recently. Before I closed down my salon, I didn't have any social media accounts. Yes, I'm actually very serious. I didn't even have a Facebook account. I only had the WhatsApp app, and that was just so I could interact with my family and my clients. I was always too busy to waste time on social media. But since I became very bored and tired of staying home doing nothing, I decided to get on social media. I opened accounts on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, and even Snapchat. I uploaded some of my pictures there and rapidly watched my account grow. I already have thousands of friends, and I communicate with some once in a while. My husband doesn't know about it because I don't really think that this has anything to do with him. Opening a social media account is normal for most individuals, so I just went with it. So, while I was scrolling around yesterday, I stumbled upon a friend request that made me raise my brows. I normally just accepted every friend request I got without scrolling through the person's profile, but the one I got yesterday piqued my interest. On the profile was a very handsome man, and his timeline was filled with very hot pictures. I couldn't understand why a man like that sent a woman like me a friend request. I'd not used such apps before, so I think I'm still quite naive. I clearly stated I'm married on my bio, so I didn't get why. A man like that thought it was okay to be friends with me. I spoke to my sister about it and she laughed at me. She told me I was being dramatic and that it was absolutely normal to receive friend requests from people whether you're married or not. We ended up laughing about it and she casually told me to accept the friend request. At first I was a little bit skeptical, but then she made it clear to me that not all friends actually message each other. She said that the fact that I had 2,000 friends didn't mean I'd talk to each of them. She said most friends are just there to look at your pictures or add to the numbers. That made some sense to me, so I casually accepted the friend request. Now, the problem is that barely a few minutes after accepting the friend request yesterday at midnight, he messaged me. It's normal to receive a message, but it's the endearment he used that actually caught my attention. He just casually said, "Hi, dear." I was shocked, and the use of the love emoji had me cleaning my eyes to see if I was dreaming. Now, I really do feel like I shouldn't have waited years before having a social media account. Now I'm busy overthinking things and seeing small activities as a big deal. I decided to just reply with a simple hello, so I would not end up acting like a fool. I couldn't speak to my sister anymore because I didn't want her to make fun of me. I don't want to say the guy's real name, so I'll just refer to him as Logan. Logan and I have been chatting quite frequently since yesterday, and I spent over 3 hours speaking to him over the night. I don't know if what I'm doing is right or if I should just end the conversation and stop replying to his messages. What's bothering me is the fact that he uses the love emoji a lot. He uses heart emojis and all those suggestive things. He calls me love, dear, and sweetheart. I don't know if a married woman like me should be engaging in such conversations. I'm quite confused. Even though I've tried avoiding the messages, I just can't help but keep replying to him. I think the reason for this is my current state of joblessness. I don't know what to do, guys. And that brings me to the first statement I made when starting this post. I said sometimes not everything is a yes or no answer. I could just unfriend him and stop replying to his messages, but something so simple is becoming way too difficult for me. Now I understand that saying. An idle mind is the devil's workshop. Update. Social media is dangerous. The fact that you see a person's picture doesn't mean you know anything about their life. It's been a crazy ride, guys. I'm in shock as I write this to you all. Nothing is as it seems, and I have learnt this the hard way. My social curiosity has come to bite me in the back, and right now, I've realized the mistakes I've made. I cannot believe that my life has gone south in just 4 months. It's just been 4 months, but I've experienced so much change that I'm still finding it hard to comprehend everything. If you're wondering what I'm trying to say, then let me just put it this way. I didn't stop speaking to my Facebook friend. Logan and I are still in contact, and the drama that's come with it is too much to comprehend. I've experienced a lot during these past 2 weeks, and I don't think I ever imagined my life taking such a turn. Barely 2 days after making this post, Logan and I became friends. When I say we became friends, I really mean it. We kept on interacting so much that 2 days felt like forever. He asked for my phone number, and I gave it to him. That's how we started chatting on WhatsApp. He called me almost every hour, and since I was jobless at home, I had enough time to pick his calls and engage in conversations with him. I was conscious at first, and I tried to limit the way we talked to each other, but at some point I stopped being conscious and started speaking to him freely. I didn't understand why a stranger thought it was okay to casually tell me about his life. Maybe it's because I never really had a social life before. That's the excuse I always gave myself when he did things I considered too forward. He would ask me to send him pictures and I would send it to him. He also sent me his pictures, so it was like a give and take situation. He always called me beautiful and I ended up blushing in return. I also found him attractive, but I tried my best to keep that to myself. A part of me always kept reminding me that I needed to keep boundaries between us because I was still married. But I knew I could not deceive myself because it was obvious to me that I'd already started crossing a lot of boundaries. I knew deep down that I was acting out because I was angry with my husband. Stanley had still not given me any form of financial support, even though I'd been home for quite some time. During one of my chats with Logan, he asked me what job I did, and I told him I owned a salon, but I'd closed it down temporarily. He was shocked when I told him that, so he asked me why I chose to do what I did. I explained everything to him, and that's when he told me he's actually an accountant. and could help me calculate my tax rate if I told him the necessary information. I did just that, and that's when he confirmed that I was really being charged extra. I was really happy to know that I was not wrong, and I didn't close down my salon for nothing at all. He asked me why I just closed it down like that, and I told him I had a lot of customers, but I was just not earning enough profit at the end of the month when I calculated my income. He called me immediately after reading the text message and started asking me questions about my employees and how I run my business. He randomly asked for my account number while we spoke. I asked what he wanted to use it for, and he just casually told me he wanted to use it for some financial calculation. I knew he was just trying to make up an excuse, and I knew he wanted to give me money. I sent him the account number, but didn't expect to get a credit alert barely 10 minutes later. I got a credit alert of $1,000. I was shocked, to say the least. A stranger who I had known for just 2 weeks had sent me $1,000 randomly. I knew he wanted to send money, but I didn't think it would be that big. I imagined he'd just send a few dollars or so. The fact that I didn't even ask him for it and he just sent it made me really surprised. I called him immediately and asked him why he sent me money. He just laughed it off and told me that was just his way of appreciating me. I felt bad about receiving that kind of money, so I sent it back to him and told him I couldn't accept the money. He sent it back to me and told me I should just accept the money. I really appreciated it because for someone like me, who had spent weeks at home being jobless, I appreciated the gesture. It was a huge start for me to have some savings I could use to get my business back on track. Our bond became even stronger, and we started video calling each other. For me, it felt like I was talking to a friend I'd known all my life because he was just too nice. I loved everything about our friendship, and the way he always called to check up on me and give me business advice. I started receiving random alerts, and when I asked him why he sent it, he would tell me not to bother. Within another 2 weeks, I'd been able to receive $2,000. It was more than enough money for me to get back on my feet. Logan was an accountant, so he gave me a lot of tips on how to manage money. I'd gathered $3,000 from someone I wasn't even married to, and my husband found it hard to give me little money to fund my salon. Of course, I'm human, and a lot of ideas got into my head. I kept telling myself that I'd been a total for trying to keep boundaries between me and Logan. If my husband couldn't give me money for trying to fund a salon, then why should I even bother? It wasn't like I asked for money to spend recklessly on luxurious clothes. All I wanted was to get my business back together. He didn't give me financial advice or even try to think of a solution with me. He just made me a housewife and went to work every day like nothing happened. I felt like Logan was better than my husband, and so I just decided to be free and do whatever my heart wanted. Stanley started noticing the way I withdrew from him, and even though he tried to pretend like it didn't bother him, I knew he felt some type of way. But honestly, I didn't care because I was still very angry. If you're not ready to give your wife what she wants, didn't be angry when she eventually looks elsewhere. That's the logic I used, and that's what I used to validate my actions. When I told Logan I planned on opening up my salon again, he was really proud of me. He sent me money again, and even offered to send some help. He was able to send some workers to clean up the salon and renovate some things. He did everything from his own pocket, and I didn't have to spend much money at all. At some point, Logan told me he was finally ready to meet me physically. He lived in another city, which was 4 hours away, but he told me he would make time to come see me after I opened my salon. I was also finally ready to meet Logan because, to be honest, I'd fallen in love with him. Yes, guys, I fell in love with the guy I met online. I loved him because I couldn't believe that a guy that never saw me or got intimate with me could love me that much. Normally, if a guy cares for you like that, you would imagine he just washed your body. But Logan hadn't met me, and he treated me with so much love, so I was certain that I'd fallen in love with him. I didn't tell Stanley I reopened my salon at first because I felt like he didn't care. I felt like the way he had been nonchalant before meant that it didn't bother him that I was jobless, so I didn't tell him anything. He left the house before me and came back after me, so he was clueless. Maybe he didn't suspect anything at first because he was so sure I'd been too broke to start it up all over again. But just like every other experience, this one also had a traitor. You know, I told you guys I had people that worked under me, right? So, Logan told me he suspected that the reason I wasn't earning enough was because my workers were not being honest with my finances. He advised me to sack all of them because he felt like there was someone being dishonest. Some of my workers had moved on and seen other jobs, except only 2 of them. I told them there was no need to come back and advised them to look for other jobs. One of them is Stanley's cousin, and she came to the salon to beg me, but I refused. While she was at the salon, I received a video call from Logan and we flirted on the phone. I forgot about Stanley's cousin, Anna's presence, and she used that to her advantage. She told Stanley that I was cheating on him and I was flirting with another guy. She also told him I fired her and reopened the salon. When I got back that day, Stanley welcomed me angrily and confronted me. He told me that Anna visited and had a lot to say about me. First of all, he asked me why I had the audacity to fire his cousin. Yes, he really said that. It's the audacity for me. He then asked me why I didn't tell him I was planning on reopening my salon. He told me I was foolish for trying to keep secrets from him when he had ears and eyes everywhere. Stanley then accused me of cheating on him because Anna told him she saw me flirting with another guy. I didn't keep mute. Of course, I tried to defend myself by asking him if he had any evidence to back what he said. He told me he was sure I was cheating because that would be the only explanation for having enough money to reopen the salon when I was jobless for weeks. I got really upset that he was so confident I could only reopen my salon by getting money from someone else. That just proved to me that he didn't help me intentionally and left me defend myself. I foolishly told him I was in love with someone I met online, but I had not met him physically yet, so that meant that I didn't cheat on him yet. Stanley got upset when I told him that and said he wanted a divorce. I was actually happy, and I told him I wanted a divorce too, because I couldn't stay with a stingy, selfish man. The next day, I packed my things and left the house. Of course, I had enough money on me. Stanley also told me he filed for divorce and would send me the papers in a week. Logan was aware I was married, so I told him what happened with my husband. He told me he wanted to see me the next day because he was already in the city. I was surprised because we planned on seeing each other at a later date, so I didn't understand why he wanted to love it forward. But since he was already in the city, I agreed. I waited for him at a restaurant, and that was when I met the shock of my life. A woman walked into the restaurant and grabbed my shirt suddenly. At first, I tried talking calmly because I thought she had mistaken me for someone else, but I later discovered that she was Logan's wife. She showed me wedding pictures of Logan and herself and accused me of being a husband snatcher. It felt like I was in a movie, but it was real. Apparently, I'd fallen in love with a married man. She poured a full jar of water, slapped me across the face before warning me to stay away from her husband. I was too shocked to act back. I went home and fried myself to sleep because I realized that I'd ruined my marriage for a married man. I called Logan's other number and told him everything that happened. He was surprised because, according to him, he wasn't the one that asked us to meet, and he checked his phone, but there were no messages like that. He later discovered 2 days later that his wife was the one I chatted with that day, and she deleted the messages when she was done. He apologized to me and asked if we could meet again, but I refused. I blocked all his contacts and blocked him on social media. He had a child, and from what I saw that day, his wife is not ready to leave him. I might be stupid, but I'm not stupid enough to ruin another woman's marriage and break a child's family. If I was aware that he was married, I wouldn't have let things get that far. Stanley sent me the divorce papers 1 week later after he signed them. I signed them too and sent it to him. Our divorce would be finalized in 2 months. I didn't go back to beg because I knew I was at fault, and if Logan's wife didn't come to beat me up, I wouldn't have gone back to him. Our marriage was over from the moment he refused to help me, and from the moment I started encouraging another man's messages. My karma hit me hard because bad decisions lead to bad circumstances. A married woman shouldn't date online. Social media is also deceptive because a person can lie through their teeth, yet you won't know.